A joyful bride is murdered on her wedding night for wealth, but 7 years later, her spirit returns to expose the truth and claim justice. The morning sun rose gently over the town, as if it too had come to witness Anita's happiness. Drums echoed through the air, women sang in bright voices, and laughter danced between the walls of the compound. It was Anita's wedding day. A day she had imagined since childhood, a day she believed would mark the beginning of safety, love, and a beautiful future. Anita sat quietly as her friends adjusted her veil, their hands warm, their smiles wide. Her wedding dress glowed white, pure and hopeful, just like the dreams beating inside her heart. Her mother's eyes shimmered with pride, her father stood tall despite his tears, and her younger brother watched her as though she were a queen. In that moment, Anita felt chosen by life itself. When Emmanuel arrived, dressed sharply and surrounded by admiration, Anita's heart fluttered. He was calm, respected, and from a powerful family. To her, this marriage felt like a blessing layered upon a blessing. Love, stability, and honor all wrapped into one promise. As they exchanged vows, her fingers trembled slightly, not with fear, but with excitement. Was this not the kind of future every woman prayed for? As the ceremony ended, the celebrations grew louder. Food was shared, elders prayed, and guests spoke of how fortunate Anita was. Cameras flashed, capturing her smile from every angle. She smiled so much her cheeks ached, but she did not mind. Happiness often comes with small pains, she thought. Inside her chest, her heart whispered promises of tomorrow. I will be a good wife. I will build a peaceful home. I will make this marriage work. She believed love was enough. She believed marriage was a shelter. Yet beneath the music and joy, there were moments Anita did not notice. The way Emmanuel's smile faded too quickly. The way his mother watched her, eyes sharp and unreadable. The way certain relatives spoke in hushed tones when she passed. But joy has a way of blinding the heart, and Anita was too full of hope to question A. As the sun slipped beneath the horizon, the music faded, and the last of the guests drifted away, the mansion slowly transformed. What had been bright and lively just hours ago now felt heavy and unfamiliar. The corridors grew long and quiet, and the laughter that once filled the air vanished as though it had never existed. Anita sat alone in the grand bedroom, the soft glow of oil lamps casting gentle shadows on the walls. Her wedding dress, once crisp and radiant, now rested loosely around her, wrinkled from a long day of smiling and celebration. She touched the fabric absently, still trying to absorb the reality of her new life. She was a wife now. A bride who had crossed into a powerful family. And yet, an uneasiness settled deep in her chest. From the moment they returned home, Emmanuel had been distant. He spoke little, his responses short and forced. When she reached for his hand, he pulled away slightly, as if distracted by thoughts he could not share. His eyes avoided hers, and when he smiled, it did not reach his soul. Anita tried to reason with herself. Perhaps he was nervous. Perhaps the weight of responsibility was pressing on him. But why did the silence feel so loud? As servants passed by, Anita felt their glances linger longer than necessary. Some looked at her with pity, others with something colder, almost like fear. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Doors closed too quickly. Even the walls of the mansion seemed to whisper secrets she could not hear. She stood before the mirror, carefully removing her jewelry, watching her reflection stare back with uncertain eyes. Why does my heart feel uneasy when I should be at peace? She remembered her mother's voice, always gentle, always protective, telling her that a woman's intuition is never empty. Anita shook the thought away, forcing a soft smile at her own reflection. This is your home now, she whispered, as if the words alone could make it true. Footsteps echoed briefly outside The night air was thick and unusually still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Anita stood near the window, unable to sleep, her uneasiness growing with every passing moment. The mansion, so grand and welcoming in the daylight, now felt cold and watchful. Drawn by a strange instinct she could not explain, she gently pulled aside the heavy curtains and looked down into the courtyard below. What she saw made her heart stop. Under the pale glow of the moon, several figures stood in a wide circle, dressed in long white robes. Their faces were half hidden, but their movements were deliberate and synchronized, as though rehearsed many times before. Low chanting drifted upward, deep and rhythmic, carrying words Anita could not understand. At the center of the circle sat a clay pot, flames flickering wildly, sending thick smoke into the air. The smell reached her next, sharp, metallic, and unfamiliar. It made her stomach twist. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed dark shapes scattered on the ground. Chickens lay lifeless, their feathers stained and torn. Fresh blood soaked into the earth, glistening in the firelight. Anita's breath caught in her throat as fear flooded her senses. Could this really be happening in her husband's home? She stepped back from the window, her hands trembling, her pulse pounding in her ears. This cannot be real. This must be some harmless family ritual, she told herself, desperately searching for comfort in denial. After all, many families prayed deeply after weddings, didn't they? Maybe this was a blessing ceremony, something ancient but innocent. But the chanting grew louder, heavier, pressing against her chest like a weight. One of the men raised his hands toward the sky, his voice breaking into a sharp cry that sent a chill through her spine. Another poured something thick and dark into the fire, causing the flames to leap higher. Shadows danced wildly along the courtyard walls, twisting into shapes that filled Anita with D. The door creaked open slowly, breaking the fragile silence of the room. Anita turned, expecting to see her husband alone, ready at last to speak to her, to explain the strange heaviness of the night. Instead, Emmanuel stepped inside with his mother behind him, followed by two of his uncles. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold, stripped of all celebration. Anita's heart dropped. Mama Agnes moved first, her voice smooth and controlled, as though she were discussing something ordinary. "Anita," she said calmly, "it is time." Anita frowned, confusion washing over her face. "Time for what, Mama?" she asked softly, glancing at Emmanuel for reassurance. Silence answered her. Emmanuel stood still, his head lowered, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. He would not look at her. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, pressing against Anita's chest. Her instincts screamed that something terrible was about to unfold. "You were chosen," Mama Agnes continued, her words sharp and final, "for a purpose greater than yourself. Do not resist." Chosen? Anita's breath caught as the meaning slowly settled in. She stepped back, her voice trembling. "Emmanuel," she whispered, "what is she talking about?" Her eyes searched his face desperately, begging for denial, for anger, for anything that would prove this was some cruel misunderstanding. But he said nothing. One of the uncles moved forward, holding a folded white cloth. Another closed the door behind them with a dull thud that echoed through Anita's soul. Panic surged through her veins. "Please," she cried, shaking her head, "this is my wedding night. I am your wife." Was love truly this easy to destroy? Finally, Emmanuel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Forgive me, Anita. I had no choice." Tears filled his eyes, but he still would not meet her gaze. Her world shattered in that moment. "The man I trusted has already handed me over to death." Before she could move, strong hands gripped her arms. She screamed. The courtyard was alive with firelight when Anita was dragged into the circle. Flames rose and fell, casting cruel shadows on the walls, while the chanting returned, louder now, heavier, filled with a hunger that felt ancient. Her bare feet scraped against the cold ground as she was forced forward, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a torn memory of joy. The night sky above was wide and silent, uncaring to her screams. Anita's eyes searched the faces around her, desperate for one familiar expression to soften. She found Emmanuel standing at the edge of the circle. His face was pale, his body rigid, his eyes filled with tears that never fell. He watched as if frozen in place, a witness to a crime his heart could not stop. Why does love turn its face away when courage is needed most? They pushed Anita to her knees near the fire. The heat burned her skin, and the smoke stung her eyes. Her hands shook violently as she tried to pull away, but there was no escape. The chanting grew faster, sharper, rising and falling like a dark song meant to awaken something unseen. This cannot be how my story ends. Mama Agnes stepped forward, her voice calm and commanding, as if this moment had been written long before Anita was born. She spoke words Anita could not understand, words that seemed to bind the night itself. A sharp object glinted briefly in the firelight, then disappeared from view. Anita closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, her breath breaking into quiet sobs. In her final moments, she thought of the morning, the laughter, the music, the dreams she had carried so carefully into this house. She thought of her mother's smile, of the innocence she had lost before sunset. The fire crackled louder, as though answering the ritual's call. The chanting stopped suddenly. A deep silence followed, broken only by the hiss of the flames. The ritual was complete. The covenant sealed. Anita's body lay still, her wedding dress stained and heavy against the grue. Morning arrived with a cruel calm, as if the night had never happened. The mansion gates opened quietly, not for celebration, but for silence. A message was sent to Anita's family, short, controlled, and carefully crafted. They were told she had fallen suddenly ill. That she did not survive the night. No details. No explanations. Just death. Anita's parents arrived before noon, their hearts still wrapped in the joy of yesterday's wedding. Her mother carried sweets meant to be shared, her hands trembling with excitement that had not yet turned to fear. But the moment she stepped inside the mansion, something broke within her. The air was too quiet. Too heavy. Grief stood waiting before words ever did. Mama Agnes spoke with a rehearsed sadness, her eyes dry, her voice steady. It was God's will, she said softly. We did everything we could. Anita's father stood frozen, struggling to understand how a daughter who had laughed just hours ago could now be gone. Her brother clenched his fists, anger and confusion battling in his chest. He searched their faces for truth, but found only walls. How does a life disappear between sunrise and sunset? Anita's body was brought out, wrapped tightly in white cloth. Her face was hidden, as though even in death she was not allowed to speak. Her mother collapsed at the sight, a sound tearing from her throat that no one could quiet. She reached out, begging to see her daughter one last time, but was gently pushed back. There is no need, they said. She is at peace. But why does peace feel so cruelly empty? The burial was rushed. No proper rituals. No time to ask questions. Earth fell heavily onto the grave, each sound sealing lies beneath the soil. Anita's father stood silently, his shoulders bent under a grief too large for words. Her brother knelt, pressing his palm into the dirt, feeling as though he was losing her all over again with every handful thrown. Around them, the powerful family stood united, faces solemn, 7 years passed, but some endings refused to stay buried. In a quiet village far from the mansion of blood and fire, a young woman named Nigh grew into adulthood. From the outside, her life looked simple. She helped her mother with daily chores, walked the dusty paths each morning, and laughed softly with friends who knew nothing of the storms inside her. Yet every night, when darkness fell, Nigh's peace shattered. Her dreams were never ordinary. She saw flames dancing in circles. She heard chanting that made her chest tighten. She felt cold stone beneath her knees and the sharp sting of fear wrapping around her heart. Often, she woke up gasping for breath, her body trembling, her pillow damp with tears she did not remember shedding. Why do memories hurt when they do not belong to this life? Nigh had been having these dreams since childhood. At first, her family called them nightmares, nothing more. But as she grew older, the visions became clearer, too clear to ignore. Faces appeared in the firelight. A mansion she had never seen felt strangely familiar. And most haunting of all, a woman in a white dress cried out to her, eyes filled with pain and betrayal. Why does my soul remember what my mind cannot explain? During the day, small moments triggered sudden flashes. The smell of burning wood made her dizzy. The sound of rhythmic chanting from a distant festival sent her heart racing. Once, while passing a wedding procession, her knees weakened, and tears streamed down her face without warning. She could not explain the grief, only feel it deep in her bones. Na began to sense that her dreams were not imagination. They felt like memories, heavy, unfinished, demanding to be seen. At night, she started writing them down, filling page after page with symbols, fire, blood, and a name she had never learned yet somehow knew. Anita. The name echoed in her chest like a heartbeat. It followed her through waking hours, whispering in silence, calling her toward something Fate has a strange way of closing circles. Na never imagined that love would carry her back to a place her soul feared without knowing why. It began simply, almost gently. A meeting by chance. A conversation that felt familiar too quickly. Emmanuel's younger cousin, Daniel, was kind in a quiet way, patient, attentive, nothing like the men who appeared in her dreams. With him, Na felt seen, safe, and strangely understood. Love grew slowly, like a promise whispered instead of spoken aloud. When Daniel invited her to visit his family estate, Na felt a sudden tightness in her chest. She could not explain it. The name of the place stirred something deep and restless within her. Still, she agreed, convincing herself that fear without reason had no power. The moment the car passed through the iron gates, her heart began to race. The mansion stood tall and unchanged, its walls heavy with memory. As Na stepped inside, the air felt thick, pressing against her skin. Her head throbbed, and the scent of burning wood drifted faintly through her senses, though no fire burned nearby. Her footsteps echoed, and with each sound, fragments of another life stirred awake. Why does this place feel like a wound that never healed? Faces emerged from the shadows of the past. Mama Agnes, older now, froze the moment her eyes met Na's. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled slightly before she forced a smile. Others noticed it too, the sudden shift, the unspoken panic that passed quietly through the room. They know me, even if they pretend they do not. At night, Na's dreams returned stronger than ever. Firelight. Chanting. A woman in white falling to her knees. She woke gasping, her body slick with sweat, her heart pounding as a name tore through her mind. Anita. During the day, memories surfaced without warning. A corridor she avoided without knowing why. A courtyard she could not step into. The sound of prayer that made her hands shake. Daniel noticed her distress, his sea. The wedding hall was filled once again with flowers, prayers, and soft music. Guests gathered with smiling faces, unaware that the air carried more than celebration, it carried truth waiting to breathe. Na stood beside Daniel at the altar, dressed in white, her hands trembling slightly as the priest spoke of love, unity, and sacred vows. As the prayers continued, a sudden stillness fell over the room. Na's body stiffened. Her breath grew uneven. Her eyes slowly lifted, no longer filled with nervous joy, but with a deep, ancient sorrow. The music faded into silence, and every gaze turned toward her. Daniel whispered her name, confused and afraid, but she did not respond. Something else had awakened. Na's lips parted, and when she spoke, her voice was not entirely her own. It was calm, steady, and heavy with pain that had waited years to be heard. I stand before God and man, she said, not as a bride alone, but as a soul betrayed. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Mama Agnes rose halfway from her seat, her face drained of color. Her hands shook violently now. She knew that voice, not by sound, but by memory. The past she had buried was standing in the light. Why does truth choose the holiest moment to reveal itself? Na turned slowly, her eyes locking onto the family seated in the front rows. 7 years ago, she continued, I was brought into this house with songs and promises. By nightfall, I was offered as blood to feed greed. Gasps echoed through the hall. Whispers burst into frightened murmurs. Daniel stepped back, horror written across his face. I am not here to destroy, I am here to finish what was denied. One by one, the guilty were exposed. Names were spoken. The ritual was described. The fire. The blood. The silence that followed. The words poured out uncontrollably, as if held back by time itself. Mama Agnes collapsed into her chair, sobbing, while others cried out in denial that sounded hollow even to their own ears. The priest dropped. The days that followed felt heavy, yet strangely calm, like the silence after a storm finally passes. The confession spoken before God and witnesses could not be undone. Authorities arrived. Investigations opened. Doors that once closed with power now opened with fear. The family that had ruled through wealth and secrecy began to fall apart. Their accounts were frozen. Their properties seized. Names once spoken with respect were now whispered with shame. Mama Agnes, once strong and commanding, sat alone in quiet rooms, her mind fractured by memories she could no longer control. Others turned on each other, blaming, denying, breaking under the weight of truth they had carried for years. What happens when the lie that fed you finally starves? Daniel stood aside from it all, grieving not just what was lost, but what should never have been. He visited Nigh every day, holding her hand gently, apologizing for a sin he did not commit but carried through blood. Nigh listened in silence, her eyes softer now, no longer haunted. At night, something changed. The dreams stopped. No fire. No chanting. No screams tearing through her sleep. Nigh woke one morning to sunlight pouring through the window and realized her heart was quiet. For the first time since childhood, there was no fear waiting behind her breath. She is at peace, and so am I, she thought, tears sliding down her face, not from pain, but release. That night, as Nigh stood alone beneath the stars, a warm breeze brushed past her, gentle and reassuring. For a brief moment, she felt a presence, not heavy, not broken, but light. Grateful. Complete. She closed her eyes, and in her heart, she knew. Anita was free. No longer bound to blood or betrayal. No longer whispering through nightmares. Her soul had been heard. Her truth had been spoken. And with justice served, she could finally rest. Nigh breathed deeply, feeling her own life begin, not as a continuation of pain, but as something new. She was no longer a vessel for greed.